It's a fine evening, and it's time for another competitive Warhammer Fantasy Battle report, featuring the return of Chantel the Prophetess and her merry men of Bretonnia. So I'm up against serial tournament winner Nav the Master Hussein, who's going to be fielding Dark Elves. This is the army I'm going to be taking to a Warhammer tournament in Cardiff, where I'm hoping to put in a somewhat better performance than I managed at the Triple Crown. So, it is, at 2,500 points, Chantel, who is a level 4 prophetess on Heavens with the Power Stone. Then there's the Green Knight. Then for heroes, we've got Marie, the level 2 Beast Wizard, riding a horse. We've got then 3 Paladins who are in the front rank of that Red Knight unit at the back. Pierre, my trusty battle standard bearer, this time just with a lance and a shield. Then we've got Gaston, with a lance, a shield, the Tress of Isolde, and the Virtue of Knightly Temper. We've then got Michel, with a lance, an enchanted shield, a luckstone, the Virtue of the Impetuous Knight, and the Antlers of the Great Hunt. For core, who are the rest of those Red Knights, we've got 9 Knights of the Realm, with full command and the Banner of Swiftness. We've then got 12 Knights Errant, those are the blue guys on the right, with full command and the amusing Erranti banner. We've then got 5 Knights Errant, those are the guys there in white at the front, with full command. We've then got 10 Skirmishing Peasant Bowmen, which are Chantel's bunker. For special, we've got 3 Pegasus Knights with lances, shields, and a champion. And then finally, for rare, we've got 2 Field Trebuchets, 9 Grail Knights, those are the guys there in green and yellow, with full command and the Banner of the Eternal Flame. And then we've got those 2 cute unicorns next to Chantel from the Storm of Magic supplement. Now, astute viewers will recognise that there are a few changes in this list compared to the ones I've used before. This is partly because in the Cardiff competition, it's necessary to have more banners to claim objectives. So the Grail Knights and the small unit of Knights Errant have both got banners. This has meant I've had to rejig my heroes especially quite a bit. I've had to drop Jacques, despite him being rather useful, but he has been replaced with 3 Pegasus Knights. And then I've got a rather different loadout on those 3 Paladins. Not as much emphasis on 1-up rerollable armor saves, but I do have the guy with the Virtue of Knightly Temper, who hits very hard on the charge, and also this item Antlers of the Great Hunt, which lets you roll an extra dice when you pursue. I think that might catch a few people out. Overall, this list is +4 on the Triple Crown comp, where you get positive points for picking things that are less competitive, negative for more competitive. So again, a pretty soft list, as you would expect with Bretonnians. So, looking across the table to Nav, his list is also +4, which means it's very soft for Dark Elves, really putting some of the nastiest toys away in a box somewhere in Nagaruth, with Marathi sitting on it. So, he's got for Lords a Dark Elf Lord on a Dark Pegasus, who's got the Ogre Blade and the Cloak of Twilight. We've then got a level 4 Supreme Sorceress with the Power Stone. Next, a Death Hag riding a Cauldron of Blood with the Obsidian Blade. And finally, a Black Ark Fleet Master, who is also going to accompany that Dread Spear unit, allowing the Supreme Sorceress to stand in the second rank. Onto the units themselves, well, there's a big unit of Dread Spears. It looks to be around 30 of them. They're going to be accompanying the Cauldron of Blood. Now, as Dark Elf players know, this is a far from optimal accompaniment to the Cauldron. Generally, you're going to be seeing that on Witch Elves, certainly not Dread Spears. We've then got 20 Darkshars with repeater crossbows, 16 Black Ark Corsairs with additional hand weapons, Sea Dragon Cloak and repeating crossbow pistols. We then got 20 Harganath Executioners, who are a big trouble for Bretonnians because they've got Killing Blow. Then 10 Shades, who have got repeater crossbows and double-handed weapons. To close out the list, we have a single repeater bolt thrower and then 2 Hydras, both of whom have Flaming Breath. On to spells now, and Chantel gets Comet of Cassandora, Euronon's Thunderbolt, Ice Shard Blizzard, and Curse of the Midnight Wind. Particularly pleased there to see Comet, which is excellent against Elves. Marie also gets the very useful Flock of Doom and Curse of Anrihir. On the other side, Nav's Supreme Sorceress gets Word of Pain, Unzapal's Black Horror, Night Shroud, and Doombolt. So here's the deployment, and you can see there's a little red counter in the middle of the board. That's because we're playing one of the Cardiff objectives, which is to get more fortitude-bearing units, i.e. units that have got banners, within 6 inches of that objective than your opponent, and you score 1 point at the end of every completed pair of turns from the second onwards. So, looking at the deployment from a Bretonnian perspective, I'm not entirely unhappy about it. I think that the main threat coming at me from the Dark Elves is actually initially going to be in the form of shooting. Now, even though regular Dark Shards might not seem like very much with their Strength 3 armour-piercing crossbows against Bretonnians, believe me, they're problematic. It's that armour-piercing which simply makes all the difference. And so there's actually, with the Corsairs and the repeater bolt thrower there, not a completely insignificant amount of shooting that's going to be coming my way. That being said, I don't think, with the marked exception of the Executioners, that any of these units are going to trouble my knights that much in hand-to-hand combat. I think I'm probably going to be able to destroy them, probably going to be able to break that Spearman's unit steadfast if I get a good charge with a knight unit that's got enough knights left in it. My knights errant there in blue are a little bit awkwardly positioned though on the right-hand side. They're next to some ruins, they're next to some forests, they're probably going to lose quite a lot of their number from dangerous terrain, and they're also probably going to be out of range of the General and BSB, and so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful with them. But overall, this is a slow-moving, infantry-heavy army. Yes, they're Dark Elves, and Dark Elves are probably the best army in the game, but I think I've got a pretty good chance. So, the Bretonnians pray, and I duly go second. But not before I've vanguarded my Pegasus Knights up 12 inches to the left to stare at the Dark Shards who have appeared on the left of the table, hopefully going to get rid of them before they destroy my Trebuchets, who are going to be fantastic against this Dark Elf infantry. So on Dark Elf turn 1, Nav moves up just slightly with his 2 Hydras, moving his spears up behind his Corsairs. The Flying Dreadlord has gone and moved herself up behind that sort of Grecian temple thing to survey the battlefield. Note that the Green Knight is not really there, he's just waiting to come on later. Now, in the Dark Elf magic phase, they managed to get Word of Pain off upon my small unit of Knights Errant. This reduces their movement, ballistic skill, strength and initiative by just 1, and the lore attribute goes off but doesn't damage them. Unfortunately for Nav, Supreme Sorceress not able to get off any further spells in this magic phase. Come the shooting phase, it's also a bit of a damp squib for the Dark Elves. The repeater bolt thrower doesn't do anything, and the shards manage to kill 1 Knight of the Realm. On the left-hand side of the board, where it's the Pegasus Knights versus the Shades unload their repeating crossbows, double tapping into the Pegasus Knights and cause 4 wounds, and the Pegasus Knights save all 4. So, with a banging of drums and a blaring of horns, it's on to Bretonnian turn 1, and we're feeling pretty confident. I have only 1 charge to make, and that's the Pegasus Knights into those Shades. Now they stand and shoot, and so the Pegasus Knights are having to chance their arm again. They take only 1 wound though going in, which is also really rather good. I should be able to destroy those Shades in the combat phase. So I move my army forwards, as shown, with the Knights of the Realm aggressively pushing up, daring the Corsairs to charge them because I don't think that they're going to have enough combat resolution to inconvenience my Knights, and pushing the White Knight Errant unit up so it can contest the objective. The Blue Knight Errant unit, though, do rather get their horses stuck in the mud, and I try and do a swift reform, partly because I'd misdeployed them, and fail the test, and so they can only just do a normal reform, getting rather isolated on that side of the board. Apart from that, the Green Knight manages to come on, which is excellent considering he didn't turn up at all in the last battle report, and walks out of the forest woodland to threaten that Hydra. For those of you who haven't met him before, the Green Knight is of course a ghost, and so he can't be harmed by non-magical attacks. He can only be destroyed through combat resolution. And so the Hydra, which doesn't have magical attacks and doesn't really have any combat resolution of its own unless it charges, is an excellent target for him. So it's on to the magic phase, and the Bretonnians get a pretty good one. First, Marie manages to get the Flock of Doom off on some of the Dark Shards, killing around 3 of them. And then, through cracking her Power Stone, Chantal is able to force through the Comet of Cassandora and stick it right there on the top of the Spearmen. This is really bad for the Dark Elves. They've got lots of infantry units which are in range of being cometed, and it's not as though they're going to be able to move that far away from this part of the table anyway if they want to contest the objective in the middle. This is an excellent example of why, especially when there are fixed objectives on the table, the Comet is such a dangerous spell. So, well pleased with that, Chantal's Bretonnians move on to the shooting phase, and I'm really on a silly roll here. My first trebuchet targets the executioners and immediately rolls a direct hit, squashing 14 of Harganath's finest. That's an enormous moment. That was probably the principal combat unit that I was worried about. The second trebuchet also scores a direct hit, this time on the spearmen because there aren't really enough executioners left to target, and destroys 3 of them. A simply superb shooting phase and magic phase. Now, the Bretonnians don't have it all their own way though, because when it comes to the combat phase, even though the Pegasus Knights charge into the Shades with their double-handed weapons and still striking first, wipe out the Bretonnian Knights completely before I can even swing. If I wasn't having such a good day elsewhere, I think I might have started chuntering about relative army power levels here. A bunch of lance-armed heavy cavalry just charged some skirmishing archers and got wiped before they could swing. Well, I guess that's 8th edition for you. Right, on to Dark Elf turn 2, and despite that performance there from the Shades, the Dark Elves are still in more than a spot of bother. So Nav doesn't have any charges to declare, but he does push up his units, his Corsairs and what's left of his executioners to contest that objective. Now, rather than trying to reinforce them, the Lord on the Dark Pegasus actually pops over the Knight units to get out of their charge arc. This enables her to threaten Chantal's bunker and the trebuchets behind my lines. To try to support the Dreadlord, the Hydra on the left-hand side also runs round and stares at the flank of my White Knights. The Hydra on the other side, I should say, is engaged in a game of cat and mouse with the Green Knight. Now, the Dark Elves are hoping for a good magic phase, and unfortunately they don't get one. The good news is that the Comet doesn't come, but the bad news is that they roll like garbage for their power dice, and the Sorceress is only able to get Word of Pain off on the Knights of the Realm once more, and again only rolls a 1 on the D3. That's not really going to be enough to deter the charge. Now onto the shooting phase, and the Dark Elves do get something of an unexpected bonus owing to a mistake by me. While the Dark Shards and the Shades don't really do any damage, I think the Shades might have killed a couple of crewmen from one of the trebuchets, the Unicorn, which was there on the side of my Red Knight of the Realm unit, is something of a target. And the Corsairs miss it, but the Lord, who has a repeater crossbow, manages to shoot the Unicorn off and cue a wave of panic tests, because the Unicorn, of course, does cause panic tests on Knights. No, the Unicorn is most certainly not a peasant, anything but that, a highly aristocratic Unicorn. So after seeing the Unicorn's fair hide perforated by a repeater crossbow pistol, the White Knights of the Realm flee and run towards the Hydra on the left-hand side. Fortunately, Chantal and the main Knight of the Realm unit managed to pass these panic tests. I feel a bit fortunate here. That was something of a newbie mistake, leaving that Unicorn in a place where it could trigger no less than 3 panic tests. So it's on to Bretonnian turn 2, and I've got some interesting decisions to make on whether I charge in. And in the end, despite there being Word of Pain on my Knights, I still think it's worth it. I still think I'm going to have a good chance of breaking that unit that's got the Cauldron in, unless of course it's stubborn for some reason. Now, of course, there is a unit of Corsairs there in the front, and I think I'll be able to destroy those and overrun into the cauldron unless Nav flees with them, which is exactly what he elects to do, and they bounce through the dread spears out onto the other side. So, my Knights of the Realm, with Pierre, Gaston and Michel heading them, spur their mounts into a charge. They cross the dangerous terrain with the ruins and lose one of their number going in, but otherwise are undamaged. The Grail Knights on the right hand side also declare a charge, this time against the Dark Shards, who have proven rather ineffective at shooting so far. However, the Dark Elf crossbowmen rather regain their ballistic mojo as they see the Grail Knights thundering towards them, and shoot off no less than 3 of my 9 Grail Knights from a stand and shoot reaction. However, the 6 remaining knights do make it in, and I don't think it's going to go well for the Dark Shards from here on in. Onto my movement phase, I managed to rally the white Knights Errant and turn them round to face the Hydra. The blue Knights Errant that got stuck in the mud now spur their mounts boldly forward to the centre of the battle, given there are no incoming charge threats from the Dark Elves. The Green Knight does similar, galloping up to the top of the hill and staring at the flank of the Dark Shards. Finally, Chantal decides to pop herself out of the side of that peasant bowman unit so she gets out of the charge arc of the Dreadlord. There's not much the rest of them can do, however. The Dreadlord is either going to be able to charge them or one of the trebuchets in the next turn. Onto the magic phase, and fortunately for me, that comet that I put there earlier doesn't come. Now, of course, this was another one of the factors I was weighing when deciding to charge my main Knight of the Realm unit in. Would that comet do more damage to me or to the executioners? Fortunately, as it doesn't come, neither of us have to worry about that. In the magic phase itself, Marie manages again to get off a flock of doom and manages to kill 5 of the oncoming shades. This is excellent and gives the trebuchets a bit better a chance of surviving. Chantal, in the meantime, manages to cast a Uranin's Thunderbolt on the Dreadlord. However, I find the Dreadlord, in addition to her 1-up armor save, also has the Cloak of Twilight, and is only damaged to the tune of a single wound. Not a bad magic phase, but I'm not able to get either Ice Shard Blizzard or Curse of the Midnight Wind off on the Spearman. Right, onto the combat phase, and it's a really big one. The Death Hag dances right and left with her Obsidian Blade, but can only wound one of my Paladins once. The remaining spearmen don't do any damage. When the knights turn to swing, we manage to destroy 14 of the spearmen and do a wound or 2 on the cauldron as well. After this massive kicking, the spearmen are on a double 1 and they duly fail, run, and the knights, powered by Antlers of the Great Hunt, pursue and destroy all of them and the Dark Shard unit behind them as well. Worse still for the Dark Elves, because I caught a fleeing unit, the knights were able to take a leadership test and turn round and face the centre. Surely this is the game now gone for the Dark Elves, with the heart ripped out of their army, their supreme sorceress and their cauldron of blood both dead as well. To the right of this breathless and bloody massacre, the Grail Knights are fighting the Dark Shards. The Grail Knights fight rather ignominiously and only kill around 4 Dark Shards while losing 2 of their own number, winning combat only by around 2. That is enough to break the Dark Shards, but rather than pursue them, I elect to turn and face the centre of the table. This is the first turn the objective is coming into play, and we're actually tied on it, with the 4 remaining executioners standing there alongside the White Knights Errant. However, given the Dark Elves have now only got 1 standard bearer left in their whole army in the executioners, and I've got 4 knight units on top of the objective, it's going to be almost impossible for them to win that. So, on to Dark Elf turn 3, and they've really got some serious catching up to do to avoid being slaughtered in this game. The Dreadlord swoops over the peasant bowman to attack the trebuchet, and then the Hydra on the right declares a charge against Marie and the White Knights Errant. Now, I decide actually to flee this charge because I know that I'm going to pop through my own peasant bowman and through Chantal and get far enough away from that Hydra to avoid being run down by it. However, when I roll for my flee distance, I roll a 111, and the White Knights Errant pull up in front of the peasant bowman. The Hydra is then able to complete its charge and destroy the White Knights Errant and Marie, and then turn to face the trebuchet. Still, while this is a bit of a problem, I don't think it's really going to materially affect things because I'm still so far ahead in the game. The destruction of the Knights Errant also panics the unengaged Trebuchet, and finally Nav is able to rally his Darkshard unit and turn to face the Grail Knights. However, they're going to get a charge from the Green Knight in the next turn. Back over to the Bretonnians for their third turn. Chantel's keen to make this quick. The Knights of the Realm and the Blue Knights Errant both charge the remaining 3 executioners plus the Fleet Master who has joined them. The young men lose 2 from a dangerous terrain in the ruins in the centre, and the Knights of the Realm also lose 1 from the forest. But this really seems rather small potatoes. Meanwhile, the Green Knight charges the Darkshards, who elect to flee. They flee in such a way that they actually bounce through the Knights of the Realm and end up upon the forest, but also very much in the zone of potentially being commeted come the magic phase. The Green Knight has no other viable targets and so simply trots forward on a failed charge. In the magic phase, Chantel does not roll well and the Dark Elves manage to keep the Bretonnian prophetess more or less at bay despite having no wizard of their own. The only spell she's able to get off is Curse of the Midnight Wind on the Dreadlord, who I neglected to say destroyed the Trebuchet and turned round to face the centre of the table. However, the big news of this magic phase is it's time for the comet, which strikes the centre of the battlefield. I roll an 8, which we add 3 to now given the number of times the comet hasn't appeared, and so everything within 11 inches of the comet takes 2d6 plus 3 strength 8 hits. Horrible. The executioners manage to avoid the worst of the comet and actually only lose a couple of their number. The Knights of the Realm get pretty flattened and 5 knights go down from Chantel's own comet. The young Knights Errant, in the meantime, very fortunately are just half an inch outside the comet's range. The Dark Elves, however, don't really get away with it though, because that comet rolls, I believe, a 10 on the Darkshards and flattens the remainder of the unit to a man, completely destroying them. Not too bad really. I could easily have also lost that Knight Errant unit as well to that comet, which can of course be a problem when you cast it upon your opponent and it doesn't come and you really want to charge with your knights. You sometimes end up getting hit as well. Now, onto the combat phase, and I destroy what's left of the executioners, although don't manage to kill the Black Art Fleet Master who is accompanying them. He loses combat though by a great deal, breaks and flees, and I elect to pursue with my Knights of the Realm, careering forwards with the Antlers of the Great Hunt right down past the centre of the table towards my own deployment zone, catching him but also placing me in a position where I can be flanked by the Dreadlord next turn. She does have the Curse of Midnight Wind on her though, which I did put there for precisely this eventuality. Turning to the objective, I've now won it because my Blue Knights Errant unit allow me to take it, and Nav no longer has any units that are capable of contesting it. Now I can just leave it alone and try and win the battle by as high a margin as possible. Moving swiftly on to Dark Elf turn 4, and you probably think that they're completely out of it. But you should never assume anything with this game. So, the Dreadlord charges the side of that Knight of the Realm unit, which has got 3 Paladins left and the unit champion. Then, the Hydra runs round in front of the panicked Trebuchet and lets loose with its breath weapon on the Peasant Bowman. It toasts 5 of them, there's a panic test, and Chantel's unit fails and runs toward the Roman temple. That's a bit of a problem there, I've got a fleeing general. Then, come the combat phase, I challenge the Dreadlord with my unit champion. As expected, the Dreadlord absolutely massacres him, but I've still got a rank left and so I'm steadfast. This was always my calculation here in taking the Dreadlord's charge to the side. However, fate spits in my eye and I fail this stubborn leadership 8 rerollable. That means that Pierre is cut down and the remaining 2 Paladins run away and flee, now requiring double ones to rally because they are part of a unit that was 12 models strong. The Dreadlord then makes a quite important calculation. She decides that those 2 Paladins are probably going to run off the board in the remaining 3 Bretonnian turns, and so she turns round to face the action. However, the gods of game balance are not done with the Bretonnians yet, because that blue Knight of the Realm unit that had just claimed the objective fails its panic test caused by the destruction of the Knights of the Realm, and it also flees. So now, within the space of one turn, the Bretonnians have all of their paladins, their general, and their main remaining regiment of knights all running away, even though there are literally only about 4 or 5 Dark Elf models left on the table. Onto Bretonnian turn 4, and as expected, the 2 fleeing paladins don't rally. The Knights Errant do manage to rally, however, and turn to face the centre. Unfortunately though, Chantel and the remaining peasant bowmen also continue to flee, meaning there's no magic for me. Despite this disaster, I'm still well ahead in the game in points, and I know that if I can just avoid that Dreadlord doing too much more damage, which I should be able to do, because my Knights Errant are going to be stubborn if she charges them, all I can really do is perhaps kill one of these Hydras, and then try and hold on and get the victory that I know is mine for the taking. Right, on to Dark Elf turn 5, and as expected the Dreadlord charges the Knights Errant. I'm going to have to try and bank upon my steadfast leadership 7s to try and hold that Dreadlord up. However, the Hydra also makes an audacious charge on the Knights Errant, needing a double 6, and gets it. The creature thunders through the middle of the battlefield, crashing into the young knights, on whom my chances in this game now probably rest. If they can just hold the Knights Errant and pass that stubborn leadership test on a 7, I'm going to be able to charge the Green Knight and the Grail Knight into the side of the Hydra, and then overrun into the Dreadlord. There's no magic and there's no shooting, with the exception of one single Shade who's now left. I believe that some of the other unit was destroyed from some of my shooting earlier. He's simply standing on the side of the remaining trebuchet, rattling off his crossbow into them to try to destroy them, and not succeeding. Also, and more importantly in the shooting phase, that second Hydra that's been cowering from the Green Knight runs out from behind the hill and lets the remaining peasant bowman have it with his breath weapon. He destroys 4 of them, leaving just the peasant bowman Guile Gross standing next to his general Chantel. The reason Nav did that is because now that peasant unit is going to require a double 1 to rally, meaning that it's very unlikely I'm going to get any more magic in the game, and I'm going to have to be quite fortunate for Chantel to even stay on the table, or I'll lose a big block of points. But all that is a distraction to the main event, and come the combat phase, let's see if those young Knights Errant, who of course no longer have their blessing because they did flee earlier, can hold up the Dreadlord and the Hydra. The unit champion challenges out the Dreadlord and rather minimises her impact. For its part, the Hydra managed to destroy 2 Knights Errant. It's now time for another scary leadership test, and I've failed my fair share of these in this game. So, needing a 7, I roll the dice, and they come up a 10. The young men's nerve breaks, and they run towards the table edge with both the Dreadlord and the Hydra in pursuit. The Dreadlord, however, with a fast dark Pegasus, manages to outrun them, and all of the Knights Errant are destroyed. The only silver lining for the Bretonnians, though, is the Hydra, despite rolling quite high, hasn't quite got its base out of the Green Knight's charge arc, so I will at least be able to charge it with him. Right, on to Bretonnian turn 5, and things have gone royally tits up, and we're going to really struggle here to avoid snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. So, the Green Knight charges into the side of the Hydra and arranges himself in such a way that if he destroys it, he will be able to overrun into that Dreadlord who has already lost a wound. As for the remaining things on the Bretonnian table, well, the Paladins and Chantel both continue to run towards the table edge, with the Paladins in particular rolling fairly high. If I can roll less than an 8 in my next turn, I'm going to keep the Paladins on the board by a mere inch. Onto the combat phase, and the Green Knight picks up his dolorous blade and swings it many times into the side of the Hydra. This is more than the cowardly beast can take, and its nerves fail it, and I run it down, careering into the side of the Dreadlord. We're going to get here a photo finish of the Green Knight versus the Pegasus Rider. Let's see if the champion Gilles de Breton of the fair land of Bretonnia can bring home the bacon. The only other movement I have is to reform the Grail Knights to face the remaining Hydra. This is going to be a dicey combat here, 4 Grail Knights versus a single Hydra. We'll have to see whether Nav wants that charge. So, on to the final turn of a dramatic battle, and as the sun sets on the horizon of the old world, the remainder of this battle plays out. The Hydra takes the bait and charges into the Grail Knights, but really, the focus of the action is on the duel between the Green Knight and the Dreadlord herself. So, come the combat phase, the Hydra does not damage the Grail Knights, and the Grail Knights don't damage it. It's a wash, and the Grail Knights win by a musician, but the Hydra sticks. In the Great Duel, the Green Knight's Dolorous Blade misses the Dreadlord completely, who in return sticks her Ogre Blade into the Champion of the Fae to the tune of 1 wound. The combat is a draw, and the Dreadlord turns round for the finale. As the bells begin to toll, the final Bretonnian turn is full of drama. Chantel continues to run, but pulls up around 3 inches from the table edge, and likewise the 2 paladins, Gaston and Michel, pull up 1 inch from the table edge. That's going to have a huge effect on the number of points in the game. Come the combat phase, and the Grail Knights manage to fight off the Hydra, beating it in combat by 2, breaking it and running it down to banish the monster from their lands. In the centre of the table, the gripping combat between the 2 dramatis personae reaches its conclusion. It's the power of darkness that emerges victorious, with the Dreadlord skewering the Green Knight with her Ogre Blade. In a puff of smoke, the champion of Bretonnia disappears back to the spirit world, and the ink dries on this epic battle. The only question remaining is, who's won? So we tallied up the points, and with the objective it ended up a 15-5 victory to the Bretonnians. But if you count half points for fleeing units, or count fleeing units under 25% as destroyed, it's near enough a dead heat, maybe an 11-9 victory to the Bretonnians overall. Now, just for fun, because this was a warm-up for the Cardiff tournament, we asked the CA of that tournament what his ruling was on fleeing units, and he decided that it's actually the latter case that he was going to use, so therefore this game was either a 10-10 or an 11-9. I thought this was a fabulous game of Warhammer Fantasy. The Dark Elves looked completely smashed, completely out of it, as the Trebuchet demolished their executioners, and as their Dread Spears, Cauldron and Supreme Sorceress were all destroyed in a thunderous charge by the Knights of the Realm. But then those 2 Hydras and that Dreadlord managed to rescue the situation. The Bretonnians failed a lot of panic tests, a lot of break tests, including 2 on 8 rerollable, and ended up in a position where it was difficult to mop up the remainder of the Dark Elves. Only was able to do that right at the end by defeating those 2 Hydras, just because the Green Knight happened to be within charge arc by a fraction of an inch, and the Grail Knights managed to hold off a stiff challenge from the Hydra on the right, despite there only being 4 of them left. But I think all of this goes to show that it's not over till it's over, and it looks sometimes that you've got an unassailable lead, but then a wave of panic tests might cause much of your army to run. On an analytical level, I also think this showcases how much fun it can be to get all 6 turns in a game, and this is something that in practice, in a tournament game, even if both players play quite quickly, you often don't get to see. So, with thanks to Nav for a fantastic battle in a high-octane game that swung first one way and then the other. And thanks to you also for listening to the latest instalment of Chantel's Adventures. Thank you, and good night.